Hey there, straight from Ardencroft, Delaware, it's Yoga Stories Project. This is a podcast about inspiring you to bring yoga and mindfulness into your life. Who am I? I'm Hunter Clark-Field's mindfulness mama mentor. I coach smart, accomplished, overstressed moms on how to cultivate mindfulness in their daily lives. And I've been practicing yoga and mindfulness for over 20 years and have taught thousands of people worldwide. So I'm so happy you're here. I am recording this intro right at the end of election week, and in this country, things feel pretty turned upside down. There's a lot of uncertainty. So I'm so glad you're here and tuning into something that will feed your good intentions for becoming more mindful, becoming more conscious. And this episode is absolutely going to do that for you. I'm really excited about my guest today, David Nichtern. I had so much fun talking to David. I'll tell you who he is. I've got the intro for him, but I can't wait for you to have this conversation because he has a lot of wisdom and a new book, and we talk about the wheel of life, which is so, so cool. So you're going to really love this, I know. I'm so grateful you're here. I'm so glad for everybody who I can reach with this podcast. I really feel a strong connection to you who are trying to become more conscious, who are on the path of more mindful, more conscious living, of moving beyond distraction, beyond fear, beyond that small self and into that larger self. And so I'm so, so grateful that you're here. I want to thank, we've got some new iTunes reviews since last time, 3 of them. Thank you guys so much. It really makes a huge difference to the podcast to get iTunes reviews because the iTunes algorithm, it only shows up if there's a certain number of reviews. So that really makes a big difference. Thank you so much to Life's a Party, to Johnny Gillespie, and to Michigan Mindful Mama. I know who you are. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for your reviews. They're really beautiful. You make me feel really great. But that's not the point. That's not the point of the review, to make me feel really great. The point is, let's spread the word. Let's get these teachers out there. Let's get these messages of mindfulness and more conscious living out there. So it's a great, great way to support the podcast is for you to leave a review. And of course, the most powerful way really is for you to tell a friend about it. Share it with a friend. Just, on your phone, where you listen to the podcast, there's usually a little link, a place to share it with a friend, and to word of mouth is super, super powerful. And then before we dive in, I want to thank our sponsor, and you guys, Choose to Be Nice is so amazing. They do such good work in the world. So my sponsor is Choose to Be Nice, and they have started by just wanting to put a positive impact in the world. They started after the Boston Marathon bombings, and it's a small company, and Dina is amazing. So this whole thing with Choose to Be Nice starts with a promise, and it is a promise to spread kindness whenever and wherever possible. So I have this super, super snuggly, cozy, oh my gosh, it's so cozy, Choose to Be Nice sweatshirt, and it says Choose to Be Nice on it. And I just feel really good about that message, let's make a choice to be nice. Let's remind people of this choice and bring these positive messages into our world. And it's such a great gift, because even if somebody has sweatshirts or whatever, this one is super soft and snuggly and has this amazing message, and they have hats and things. But you can go over to choosetobenice.com and sign their promise, which is so, so cool. And they help schools really sustain a culture of lasting kindness, and they work with elementary schools and things like that. So if you want to go over there and support Choose to Be Nice, and that's another way to support this podcast, use the coupon code Hunter20, just all run together. It's Hunter and then the number 2 and the number 0, and you're going to get 20% off their awesome apparel. And I think this is great timing because, I don't know, all your Christmas presents, there's hats, mugs, magnets, t-shirts. Anyway, you can spread the word. So That's it. We're going to go on to David Nichtern. Thank you so much for listening, and on to this episode. Hunter here, and welcome to Yoga Stories Project. Today, I'm really happy to talk to David Nichtern. And David is a senior Buddhist teacher, meditation guide, and an Emmy Award-winning composer and musician. And he's the author of the new book, Awakening from the Daydream, Reimagining the Buddha's Wheel of Life. So welcome to Yoga Stories Project, David.
Thank you. Thank you, Hunter. It's pleasant to be here virtually with you.
Yes, it is nice. So I'd love to talk to you and start out with sort of the first question that I start out with most of the people I talk to, which is, how did you discover yoga or mindfulness, and where were you in your life at that time?
Yeah, so we have to go into Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine, which takes us back to 1970. And I was studying music at Berklee College of Music in Boston. And at that time, we were all kind of interested in various degrees of esoteria in terms of Eastern spirituality starting to come to the West just right at the beginning of that period there. And so I was taking yoga at a studio on Marlborough Street in Boston. And as I said, going to the Berklee Music College at the same time. And my teacher at the yoga studio was one of the people who brought Trungpa Rinpoche, who ended up being my Buddhist teacher, to America. And so when he got there in the fall of 1970, he taught a workshop at the studio called Work, Sex, and Money. And that was my first exposure to Buddhism.
Work, sex, and money. Oh my gosh! So as an aspiring musician at Berklee, were you into that workshop? I guess you went. You must have found it.
Yeah. Well, I went not particularly because of the title, but I was studying closely with that yoga teacher at that time, and she really was kind of very enthused about Trungpa Rinpoche coming to the studio. Now, I thought was a great Tibetan Lama, a high incarnation from Tibet. And he was, had been trained since he was 2 years old, and he was a monastic when he grew up, but he dropped his monasticism when he came to the West. And so I was expecting kind of a different thing. I was expecting kind of a spiritually vibe, Shakti, kind of vibe, but he was extremely grounded. He wore a Western business suit, and he was extremely straightforward and grounded in what he talked about that weekend. So it kind of took me by surprise a little bit, but then made double sense, more than one time sense, 2 times sense.
Oh, so what was the teaching that resonated with you in particular at that point?
Well, I think at that point and ever since, and even into, my round as sort of presenting the teachings when I do, is the quality of ordinary life being the actual forum or container for spiritual practice. And as opposed to some kind of esoteric, alternate universe that would be created by it. Just the straightforward possibility of applying working with your mind, your heart, your emotions in a way that opened you more to everyday life and the wisdom and sanity of it rather than taking you away from it. So that was the heart of his teaching, and that's still the heart of the Shambhala community that he founded in America that's still thriving to this day.
I imagine in 1970 that there were a lot of people kind of escaping from life. That there was a lot of, from my perception is that there was a lot of getting away, like rejecting life, getting away from it, moving out to the country, moving into a commune, getting away, whatever it is. So I imagine this idea of getting your spiritual teaching from a suit-wearing Buddhist Lama and diving into ordinary life is kind of the other is kind of opposite of that.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think you're getting away from something. Usually, you're actually moving towards it. That's the big joke. If you try to get away from your anger, or your emotions or things, like usually you're sort of being governed by them rather than being able to dispel it. So the idea of through as the way to go rather than around is a very profound kind of teaching. And once you tune into that, it seems kind of obvious in a way almost that if you go around, like, in your life, if you go around something, then it always reappears at the next turn in the road. If you go through it, then you have the chance of really understanding it better and kind of, you could say, almost mastering that connection with whatever the energy that is. So it's quite logical once you get into practice that the idea of create an alternate universe at your own peril, in a sense, because then you have to live in two different worlds, basically.
Yeah, and then you can never really be at home, I suppose, in either one.
Exactly. That's well said. Yeah, you can't be at home in either one.
Well, this is interesting because the idea where you're talking about is like when we try to sort of go around things and I've heard these things sort of described like in a spiral, like these lessons that we have to learn come back to us in kind of a spiral until we can finally go through them and process them and really learn them, and they sort of keep coming back to us until we sort of have the strength to go through and learn and lean into whatever that lesson is for us. To me, it brings to mind from your book, which I have to say I love Awakening from the Daydream. It's a great book with great cover art. Gyrays, I love that. But the idea of something I wanted to ask you about, which is karma, right? And
and by the way, Hunter, you just described in that last set of statements you made, exactly what the book's about, is the spiraling through those realms, what's called the six realms in the Wheel of Life, in sort of habitual and kind of repetitive ways until somehow there's another, insight that comes out of it where you go, okay, there's a possibility of transforming this into something that's less habitual and less repetitive and more productive. So that's exactly what the book's about.
Yeah, cool. And I can see that too, because well, I want you to tell me about the book because it's pretty interesting. So I'm just going to describe it for the listener. So on the book describes this image, right? The whole book inside describes this image, which is on the front, which is there's a circle and there's a pig and a rooster and a snake in the middle, and there's these images of these different people. There's like someone on a catwalk, and there's people are arguing, and there's people making love and having babies and dying. It's like, it's great. And there's a big old skull, and there's bright fuchsia pink, So yeah. I just love this image. So tell us about
that. That, by the way, is the best description of the book I've ever heard. Because what you did? You just looked at it and told me what you saw. Well, that's exactly the point. It is a visual representation of the universe in which we find ourselves, the worlds in which we live. And it's all I did with the new images is try to make it more accessible to somebody like you living in the modern world, because the original Wheel of Life was a painting that was done under the direction of the Buddha and 2,500 years ago. So the imagery is kind of, easier to unpack if you lived in the time of that particular Indian cosmology and that way of looking at the world, which involved the idea of reincarnation and births in wholly different kind of realms. But the way I learned it from my teacher was it's really a psychological portrait of our state of mind. It has an interior dimension to it. So that's exactly right. What is it? The question you could ask in any of those things you describe is, how does it make you feel? Like to be in a world in which there's just nothing but aggression and hatred. What does that feel like? And to have that be your internal environment as well as your external environment. What does it feel like to be very attached to kind of blissful, sublime outcomes and kind of ignore the rest of reality? So these are things that the whole idea is these six realms are realms that we step through in everyday life. And I just was trying to make the whole thing more recognizable to a modern student and practitioner.
Yeah, and I think they are. It makes what I like about the image on the cover, and I come from a visual art background. I'm a painter, so this I love kind of taking apart this sort of symbology and things like that. But like the screen, there's this like escapist part of the screens in our life, and there's the shopping, and so tell us, can you tell us about give the listener a little bit of an overview of the Wheel of Life and the six realms and what they are kind of in our lives today?
Yeah, sure. Well, for one thing, for people to see this, you could go to Amazon.com and just look at the book Awakening from the Daydream by David Nichtern, and you'll see the cover, and you can blow it up on the screen, which is great. You can make it as large as you want and look at the detail. Because what I've described this as is a PowerPoint presentation from the past. In other words, it's a densely, graphically connotated view of something which is really basically our lives, and then broken into several different schemas, several different ways of looking at things that illuminate, as you unpack it, as you open it up, illuminate like aspects of the way we live, the way we think about things, the way we feel, that are extremely helpful to have illuminated, because most of the time it's just, you could say it's describing our kind of subconscious and instinctive and habitual patterns that we're not even aware of. So the first thing about illustrating something is to bring awareness to a whole area of your experience. So that's what this Wheel of Life, the old one and the new one, both are trying to do. So in doing that, they have a certain, sequence of, as you said, rings that are concentric, and expanding outward. And the whole, to start with, the whole structure is called samsara, or cyclic existence. It's exactly the connotation, Hunter, of what you said earlier, which is that you start by noting that you're sort of going through certain cycles or certain patterns over and over again, like relationships and things like that. Relationship to money, health issues, eating issues, addiction issues, where you're going through these things over and over and over again, and you can't break out of the cycle. So samsara just means kind of like vicious cycle in a way, or cyclic existence. And it is the notion of being trapped in a way. So outside of the whole Wheel of Life, there's a Buddha up in the right-hand corner who is representing the possibility of completely transforming that situation, in a sense, transcending it, which is going beyond that sense of being trapped in repetitive cycles. So then, when you start to look at it, the whole thing is, layers of information, the outside of which the whole wheel is in the mouth of a deity called Yama, which means death and impermanence. In other words, all the experiences that we're describing in here are governed by impermanence. So that is a given in Buddhist teachings, but it's profound, because we don't act as if we're impermanent. We don't act as if phenomena are impermanent. We get stuck all kinds of places defending things, feelings, as if they're permanent. Like if we hate somebody, for example, you would never consider, that may be an impermanent emotion that you're experiencing, and that you could process it and move beyond being stuck in a realm of hatred and aggression. It feels permanent. So our lives feel permanent. Everybody goes, when somebody dies, they go, "Oh, it's so sad." But everybody we know is going to die.
Yeah.
There's not one single being on the face of this planet who's going to be alive in 100 years or 150 years.
They might be frozen, I guess.
No, and we won't get into that now, but the technical possibilities obviously might change some parts of the game. But in essence, we're living in an impermanent reality, and with a kind of state of mind that gets stuck with particular ways of being and ways of looking at it, and doesn't really understand or acknowledge that impermanence. So that's the deity that's holding the whole wheel in its mouth. So that's the first thing to understand about it. That's a profound teaching right there in itself. Then, as you mentioned, there are wheels, concentric wheels. So if you go to the hub of the wheel, the very, very center of it, and you mentioned the pig and the snake and the rooster are holding each other's tail in their mouth. So they're creating kind of spin cycle. You could say if this was a dryer, this is where you put your quarters in. And the idea is it starts to spin down and you put more quarters in, which is how karma gets generated. You reinvest in these three attitudes of passion, aggression, and ignorance. Those are called the three root kleshas or obstructions. We're attached to things. We have aversion to other things, and then there's a lot of stuff we don't notice or care about. That's hello, welcome to your world. The highlights is like, if you thought today, like, well, who do I really want to see later tonight? And I love this person, my dog, or anybody, you want them in your world. And then you think, who do I want out of my world? Let's say with certain political people or whatever at the moment. Like you would just like them on another planet,
He who must not be named.
Yeah, that's the whole, well, we won't go there. So then, a vast field of indifference, which is kind of, we walk around in a daze, which is what I call the daydream. We're kind of weirdly out of it a lot of the time. And you can tell this by, like, I've given people this assignment: sit on a train or the subway on the way to work. Just look at people's eyes. They're not there.
Well,
you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah, I totally get what you mean by that. But sometimes I wonder, right? Like the idea of waking up, right? In your book is about waking up from the daydream, like waking up from these things. Like if there's so much, in some ways, like there's so much information that we can perceive with our senses, like the colors we can perceive with our eyes, the sensations we feel in our body, so much to see in the world. Like we literally can't take in all of it at once. Like, and I wonder if there's, I imagine we can enhance our ability to take in all of that at once, or take in more. But in some ways, like we kind of have to live with some indifference in some ways, right? I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a great case that you're making. If you were the attorney for the defense, I would say, you just earned your next paycheck. But there's another opportunity to look at it, which is, there was a key word there, which you said, take in. And I'm not sure that's the process of the sense perceptions. I would change that with connecting with, making a connection with. And our sense perceptions, it's very interesting. In Buddhism, unlike in certain yogic practices, the sense perceptions are considered the highest level of experiencing reality. As opposed to, like, if you could only shut those down, then you would experience a certain kind of internal reality that's transcendent, which is part of some parts of yoga tradition, where they're, blocking the sense gates. But in Buddhism, for example, in the shrine, you have 5 bowls. One is, they represent the 5 sense perceptions. They're up on the shrine. They're being kind of touted as part of the sacred environment, that you connect fully with those. So that's a big, big difference. Now, taking in, let me just finish this.
No, please go ahead.
Taking in, it's not so much about you processing it or making a story or narrative out of it. It's a field of experience that, in a way, you could say is there to appreciate rather than to take in, and also to let go of as it comes and goes. So that's the difference. Is if there's any sense of grasping at that, it becomes challenging. But if you think of the awakened state as just allowing the sense perceptions to do their job in a way, and appreciate it as if you were in a museum. When you're in a museum, you do that. You go, okay, let me look at this. But right now, for example, Hunter, I'm looking out at the East River out of my window, and the ripples in the water, and the little boats that are coming and going, and the construction across the way, and the different kinds of architecture, and then, sort of tapping into all the little cars and little beings that are moving around in that world. This world is here for us to participate in and appreciate. That's my particular take on that.
Yeah.
The more the better.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
The more the better.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I got you. And I think it's interesting, right, that we look at in some ways, because I'm a student of Buddhism and of yoga too, and I sometimes I'm looking at the sort of differences between them, and I think what you pointed out, the sense perceptions are our highest realm of reality, is like kind of interesting, because yoga is so associated in our minds, at least in our Western culture, with this, with physical sense perceptions and things like that. But here it is in the practice that is a lot more about sitting still. But anyway, I'm really digressing. Take us back to the wheel.
Well, so then where we left the wheel was with the consideration that this sort of central force, you could say, of generating all these very elaborate kind of psychologies and very elaborate worlds is our relationship to what we perceive as the world we live in from the point of view of me as an individual operator. I like it, I don't like it, I don't care. And the fact that we're chopping the world up into those three categories so fast that you don't even notice that it's happening. And from there, we begin to generate activity, or you could say further elaboration, because that's kind of a very instinctual level of experience. But it doesn't, there begins to become a central character in it, which is loosely called me, my, I, all those words that people use very liberally, if you notice it. But in a sense, you could say it's fair to say we have no idea what we mean by those words. What is I? What is me? Where does it start? Where does it stop? When did it start? What does it consist of? So it's not a question of saying, self doesn't exist, but it's more like, how does it exist? How does our sense of self come into being? And how much of it is useful and good, and how much of it is delusional and painful? So that's where you start to think, okay, well, if I don't like something, I might begin to sort of nurture a kind of aggressive attitude, create hostility, anger, even hatred, and develop a strong narrative that starts to be like, okay, I'm right, they're wrong, push, push back. And we get caught up into kind of what would be called the beginning of generating karma, which is the next ring around there, is the sort of some of the actions that we'll take kind of move us up in terms of perspective and openness. And some of the actions that we take will move us down and kind of into a darker, kind of more crowded, more claustrophobic environment. So those are the 10 skillful and 10 unskillful actions. They're as simple as like not lying, not cheating, not killing. Very, very simple. When I define karma in the book, I just said, good karma and bad karma, people talk about it. Let's simplify it. Positive karma is that which is beneficial for oneself and others. Negative karma is that which is harmful to oneself and others.
Yeah.
Boom. Simple.
Yeah, that's a great.
You don't need to be a physicist,
Mm-hmm. It is interesting because this, the wheel of life and the teachings about this, like it's like the idea of coming back to our senses and having some cognizance of these three categories and how we make up these stories and these daydreams and things like that. It's like the teachings almost are like, it's like trying to put a monkey wrench into the narrative part of our mind that is always telling stories, right?
Well, it's your questions are so good; they're so leading in a way. It's like you really should have been an attorney. You would have been really good at me.
My parents told me that when I was 7.
Who told you that?
My parents.
Oh, well, they were telling you that for a different reason than
I think so.
They just wanted not to worry about you when you're grown up if you can make a living.
Yeah.
So, but in any case, the creation of that monkey wrench. What I said, we're going to get to the realms next, which is the meat and potatoes of the book, the 6 realms, because now that you've created these sort of fields of action and responsiveness, they begin to start have a mood and a tone to it and an enhanced narrative. You could say almost like a whole world in Disney World, like you have these realms start to be like they have furniture in them, they have people in them, they have like environments, they have attitudes. They have a particular mindset in it. And it begins to become a very familiar kind of flavor of existence, which we then think, this is my world. I'm completely, the world I'm living in and my psychology are attuned to each other in a way that they kind of reinforce each other. So taking your last point, in a way, you could look at the Buddhist teachings as an intervention into the 6 realms. The Buddhas invade the 6 realms and kind of start setting off all kinds of alarms or throwing monkey wrenches into it, so that the the solidness of it is the first thing that you want to kind of penetrate. So for somebody like you, when you're meditating, you're sitting there thinking, you might be thinking, I'm not getting what I want out of life. My parents didn't, I'm not talking about you, but anybody, my parents didn't love me or take care of me properly. I don't really have any friends. I have no prospects. And that becomes a very strong psychology. When you're meditating, you look at that, and at a certain point you go, oh, thinking. And you label it thinking, you go back to the breath, which is kind of a free pass. It's like get out of jail free card, but you use it for 1 second, and then you go back to jail or imprisonment of having those habitual thoughts take over your mind. So meditation is cutting the chain of karma. It's because you don't do something, you see something. If you stop doing, you can see.
Yeah. I love that. Meditation is cutting the chain of karma. I didn't make that up, by the way. That's the deal on it. They say that when you're meditating, if you're doing it kind of the kind of path of seeing type of practice, which is just simply allowing yourself to see the experiences that arise without trying to manipulate them further, in that you are not creating new karma. While you're doing that, you're not creating karma, because think of it as simply as this. You're sitting there and you start thinking about, man, I shouldn't be meditating because I'm so hungry right now. And then you start visualizing a cheeseburger, or a veggie burger for your audience, and it's just juicy and dripping, and this would solve all my problems. And it's almost as real as the building across the street. You could almost like cut it, it's so solid, the thought. And then when you go, when you notice that that's a thought, you can then let go of the veggie burger as a mental object and return to the experience of the sense perceptions as a current experience, which the veggie burger wasn't. It was a fabricated experience. So it's like poof, a tiny, tiny moment of freedom.
Poof, a tiny. That's the title of your book right there. That's really good. Poof, a tiny, tiny moment of freedom. How to meditate. And then the point is that you begin to notice that what we call that seeing the transparency of thoughts. You're not trying to dispel or repress the thoughts. That's the wrong understanding of this practice. And a lot of people are afflicted with that wrong understanding. If I could just quiet my mind. You're trying to see the transparency of it. And that is the moment of poof, sort of awake for a moment. And of course, like any good cultivation, you just put a string of them together over time, and it becomes a kind of space that you're a little more easeful with and a little more familiar how to get there. And you might have a poof moment talking on the phone, or you might have a poof moment looking out the window. And actually, that's what I mean by awakening from the daydream, exactly the poof.
Yeah.
This is a powerful seed syllable for all of you out there.
There you go. No one's got to ever think of the word poof in the same way, I think. So in the wheel of life, these are these stories that we tell ourselves, right? Like these are these narrative stories that come from, like, I want things to be this way, so therefore that we might end up in a realm of jealousy, or things are going really wonderful and it's everything I want, so I might be sort of in that God realm, or because everything is, we might be sort of stuck in anger, but ultimately all these realms are sort of created by these stories and sensations and things that are ultimately not maybe even happening in the here and now.
Yeah, great. I mean, this is so good because, it makes me feel like, in my attempt to write the book and make this information available to people, at least one person living in Delaware, you seem very clearly to be understanding exactly what it's about. So that's encouraging. That means maybe I'll even write another book.
You should write another book. This is a good book, David. I really like it.
So so then let's keep going. As you said, these become whole narratives. An interesting way of looking at it is the realm is like a mental and physical movie that you're living in. It's like a set. And to reinforce the strong idea of I as the central hero of it all, like or the central goat, if you want to go there. Like there needs to be a kind of more complex and more comprehensive narrative. Just like if I handed you a film treatment and it was a paragraph, like an elevator pitch for a film treatment, you go, okay, I get the idea. This is a guy who's really, really depressed and anxious. That's the end of the treatment. But I want to know more about him or her. Well, how did they get that way? What are the supporting roles? What are the sort of contrasting things that are happening in that world? So each of the realms has a very elaborate kind of landscape, which either can be an internal narrative, like you're saying. In the more traditional artwork, it's sort of seen as something that becomes kind of so solidified that it becomes an external world in which you live, like the hell realms, for example, in the traditional drawing, show people being flayed alive and waterboarded and drowned and revived and tortured and have molten lead poured down their throats. So, but clearly this is a metaphor. At the same time as you could imagine easily that if that was your reality to a certain extent, it becomes physicalized. You end up in a physical world in which that's very strongly the outer shape of things too. So we're dealing more with the esoteric part of this, though, which is more the psychological dimension of it, which is more how my teacher Trungpa Rinpoche taught it.
Yeah, and you use a word that I've kind of struggled with and wondered with in the past in your book when you're talking about this stuff, and you use the word manifest. How these things they affect how we think, how we feel, and how we manifest our own personal reality. So that's kind of what you're talking about with there, where this is the psychological realm we're in, and therefore it's comes out in our personal in what's actually really happening in our reality.
Mm. Well, let's take a little tour, a little guided, get on the little bus,
yes,
and take a tour through those 6 realms. And I think the point is that obviously one of these might start to feel like, oh, this is hauntingly familiar to me. This is really, really my portrait. But all of us, I think, will recognize all 6 realms as places that we've been, that we can recognize. And as soon as you see that, the thing I talked about when I first studied this material is it really haunted me. And the phrase I used, I said that when Trungpa Rinpoche talked about the six realms, it was as if he was killing me softly with my own song. It's just like it sounded so familiar, and yet, it's like as if somebody came along and said, "Your leg's in a bear trap," and that's what that pain in my ankle has been this whole time. So that's the power of the Buddhist teachings. It's like there at some point should be some recognition of discomfort or dukkha or suffering that you've been having, and here's the source of it. Here's the origin of it, which is the basic teachings of Buddha is the existence of the discomfort, and then looking at the origin of it and then dispelling it. I mean, that's what Buddha did. That's what he teaches, and he says you have to go through certain steps yourself to have that recognition. Nobody can transplant it in you, but certainly you can have it pointed out. And that's the spirit of it. So can we go through a little trip through the realm?
That'd be great.
Yeah, and stop me along the way if it seems, like any question or confusing. But basically the relationship that you have to your world in its crudest sense is based on pleasure and pain. Those are really profound aspects of our experience, and they relate to those 3 kleshas. Either I like something, so that's pleasurable, or I want to avoid it because it's painful. And if I think about my entire day, every day, all I'm trying to do is maximize the pleasure and minimize the pain. What am I going to eat for dinner tonight? Well, you want to go to the best place and have the best thing that you like the most and have it not be rancid and be good. And what's the worst thing that happens is you go eat something Chinese food that was left in the refrigerator for 2 months, and then you end up throwing up. These are clearly defined parameters for us, what we, gravitate towards and we gravitate away from. But in the sense where we could gravitate towards a pleasurable outcome and really fixate there, and really stabilize it to a certain extent and feel like we're kind of like, there's a lot of yoga classes that could have a little bit of this tone. Feel the bliss. Feel the bliss. Okay, I'm feeling it, but my knee hurts. What do I do with that? Well, don't worry about your knee. Feel the bliss. So in a world in which pleasure is the currency of the realm, and in which you feel somewhat confident that you can stabilize it, that's called the God realm or Devaloka. So that's the highest realm. That's obviously there's some good karma there, even if you could get close to that kind of situation, something contributed to that. But the problem in the realm is not the pleasure itself; it's the attachment to it and the ignorance or ignoring of everything else, like and particularly what you're ignoring is the impermanence of the experience is being ignored. So there's a kind of high-level dullness in the God realms. Those could be temporal. Like think about somebody who's very rich, or lives in gold-plated environment, or friends we might have who just only fly on private jets or first class. It's just the norm has become this very high level of material existence. That's one level. The other is, I think, particularly appropriate for us kind of yogis and spiritual practitioner types. That is your spiritual practice heading towards the God realms. In other words, are you just trying to get a blissful state and sustain it no matter what? And kind of ignoring maybe other aspects of your experience, which are more penetrating and more provocative, but don't serve that kind of blissful outcome.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. That one makes sense?
Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay. So then the next realm down, as you go around the wheel, that one's at the top. The next realm is called the jealous gods. So interesting. And you mentioned it already, or asuras in Sanskrit. And the jealous gods have a relationship to that pleasure principle, but they know that it's not sustainable. So in a way, they on a positive side, they're kind of aware of the impermanence of it, but they're hyper aware of it. And they're also hyper focused on getting it back. So that's the realm of power and jealousy and competition, and actually measuring yourself against others in a way that like you could be happy, but if somebody else is having a good day, that's not good. You want them to be down below you. So a tyrannical boss, it's a perfect jealous god. A little league dad, a politician, a record company executive, any of us where we're just feeling, kind of within whatever paradigm we're working personally or professionally, where we feel on edge to produce, and we're really looking around to see what everybody else is doing.
So really comparative, kind of hierarchical kind of realm, state of mind, anyway.
Obsessive too. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, they're playing hardball in that realm. It's not nice there, because there's no compassion. In that competition, look, a boat just went by my window. The way I described in the book is I said, you might have a 300-foot yacht, and some of these people do actually. But you're out there, with your people on the yacht, and a 350-foot yacht goes by, and you're having a bad day. This exists, and it's about winning. It probably sounds familiar in the current landscape. It's all about winning.
Yeah. I think we can all think of a current politician that fits that description pretty well.
And it's somewhat epidemic too. In all fairness, people don't come out of nowhere.
Yeah. It's culturally, there's a big, there's all the reality TV shows. That whole comparative thing is a really, it's kind of pervasive, I think, in our culture.
Well, like who has more Twitter followers?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, who cares, really? Like one person has 60 million, the other person has 54 million, and the person with the 54 million has no trace of contentment about it. Like, hey, I'm doing pretty well.
And so then we go over to we go down to the like shopping mall.
We're not there yet. Go on the other side.
Go over the other side.
Next realm down is the human realm, which is so poignant in a way that we would think that this is also a realm, but it is considered a realm, a very special one. It's called the precious human birth. And the reason is because we have in that realm a certain kind of poignancy of existence where we know that it's impermanent because we've seen our parents or our grandparents pass away. We've had difficult childbirths. We've had beautiful children that we're so in love with. We've had dogs and pets. We have intellect. We have schools. We have workshops. We're trying to figure out who we are, what we're doing. It's an ongoing process of discovery and learning and creativity. But, there's a sort of haunting fragility to it at the same time that we know kind of, that the whole thing is a moment in time.
Is that why there's this sort of, I can't tell if they're sort of in some liquid or if there's a smokiness around them there in the human realm.
Yeah.
There's the children there, but yeah, that was one question I had about that image.
Yeah, if I ever talk to the artist, I'm going to ask him about that because a lot of people ask about that. Maybe it's a kind of just swirly smokiness, but what there is the content in that picture there is like grandma's in the hospital bed, right? And she's, she might, for people listening, she might be there right now. It's possible. And then the parents go to check in with her. The doctor's there taking care of her. And then there's the older daughter who's sort of old enough to kind of relate to it. And then there's the little kids, in the family, like the grandchildren, who don't, really haven't connected that much with the whole thing. They know they love grandma and they're visiting the hospital, but they're just playing their little video games and hanging out. So there's different levels of, cognizance of the message there, which is that things are moving along and that it's all about love and connection, and it's all about impermanence at the same time. So think about that, putting ultimate love together with impermanence. What do you get? That's compassion.
Well, it's interesting, David, because I was in that scene this spring. My grandmother died this spring, and I was there with my brother, and the little kids were not there. They were kind of playing, they were kind of away from the scene, but my brother was there, and my father and my mother were there. And I think picking that kind of scene for this human realm where we have the human realm is like where we have this opportunity to really kind of learn and transcend the samsara, right? Like transcend the daydream. And it really was this opportunity because it's like, wow, this moment and this passing is happening, and this, and it was, I even saw in my family members who are normally maybe very closed off and maybe kind of cynical and self-centered, really opening up and becoming really open and really vulnerable, which was really beautiful, Yeah,
perfectly said. I mean, that's why it's called the precious human birth. And that's where the Buddha, historically, if you think about it, it's interesting. Buddha did appear as a human being with a life just like ours, exactly the same drama. And so it's interesting to think of that kind of almost cosmic level of intelligence connecting with the human experience as really probably the pinnacle of what the Dharma is. So you can create a really uplifted version of the human realm that has a lot of awareness and a lot of compassion and a lot of wisdom. But you also could just, get into the kind of rhythm of it. Any of these realms, they're like grooves. You get into the rhythm and then you're kind of locked there for a while. So, for example, a lot of human beings, for example, that I know go, oh yeah, I've always wanted to meditate, but I don't have time. So they never can quite get around to getting out of the realm quality or the fixation quality of it towards kind of really penetrating that realm. So it's kind of a powerful portal entryway, and at the same time it can be just like the other realms in terms of like you get lost in it.
It's a lobby.
It's the Buddha's lobby. It's perfect. That's really funny. But let's keep going because there's a lot of information here. My recommendation, obviously, to anybody is after you finish looking at the picture carefully at Amazon.com, just click the button for the buy through.
Yeah. Everyone should buy the book. And if I can, I'll get a picture of the image of the book and I'll put it on yogastoriesproject.com on the show notes for this episode. So you can find that there too. Hopefully.
I mean, because I'm not, of course, I hope people, get a copy of it, but also that, we can go into it in more depth than I can, obviously, in a 1 hour conversation. But let's see if we can't finish this, our walkthrough of the realms. And then the only other point is that in each realm, we recommended a practice, a meditation practice that helps you with the energy of that realm to get more freedom and kind of more traction while you're in there. So there's always the possibility of transformation. So at the end, I'll just sum those up. But now in the human realm, you've started to fixate on pleasure and pain alternating. You go like, wow, this is really like one day I'm in love, the next day I'm getting divorced, and it's like it's enough to make your head spin, But as your relationship to pleasure and pain begins to get a little bit more predictable, you begin to become more animal-like in terms of the animal realm. In the traditional literature, the animal realm is just animals. It's like literally birds and bears and tigers and ants and butterflies. Those are beings in our world that you can see. You may not be able to see hell realm beings, but you can see animals everywhere. So again, what we're looking at is what part of our psychology begins to map to that kind of habitual, thick, ritual behavior that's totally survival oriented and not all that creative in terms of exploring the situation and deviating from routine. So the animals realm is governed by ignorance also, interestingly, just like the God realm. And anytime that you're manifesting in a kind of predictable way, with predictable routines and predictable habits, and going like, we did it this way, I'm going to do it this way again, that's kind of the portrait of the animal realm.
And that familiarity, like that predictableness, like a habit energy, that's so strong. I mean, just habits. I think that we underestimate how much we just live from habit and predictability and familiarity. I mean, even if something is harmful, it's familiar, so therefore it feels right, rather than something that may feel lovely but doesn't feel familiar, so it feels wrong.
Right. Yeah, there's a definite kind of allergy to uncertainty that happens in that realm. And taking off from what you just said, yeah, it begins to become extremely like if this one thing that we can find that can give us a buzz and give us some feeling of like life is worthwhile or pleasurable for that moment, then you begin to slide down into what's called the hungry ghost realm. And the hungry ghosts have very tiny little mouths and little thin necks and huge bellies in the traditional literature. But we made it a Black Friday sale of just mindless craving, mindless materialism, just grabbing at objects, So the hungry ghost is a very powerful metaphor for addiction, craving, pretty much any 12-step program you want to think about. Where you've created an object of desire, and ironically, the more you crave it, the further away from you it gets, because the craving is what you're really attached to, rather than fulfilling your relationship to the object. So you tend to get things that are temporary, will temporarily give a charge to the situation, and will run out really fast, and then you have to do it again. So that's a really perfect analogy for any kind of addictive mentality and situation. And the world starts to look scarce to you. It's really hard to get what you want.
Yeah,
it's always somebody else is wearing it, or or you can't get it, or you don't have enough money to buy it, or there isn't enough of it, or you consume it, but then you want more.
Yeah, sort of endless desire. And this is where desire gets a real bad rap in Buddhism, because it kind of comes to this from this point of view of like, it's this endless wanting that can't be fulfilled, that it really brings a lot of suffering to us.
Yeah, and you just have to decide for yourself if that's true or not. But we're not talking about really desire in the sense of something that you connect with and you fulfill. I have this bonsai tree in my apartment, and I love it. Especially since I saw a 512-year-old bonsai tree in Japan, I thought, oh my goodness, who knows what this is going to be in 512 years? Knowing my ability with plants, it's going to be dead in 512 minutes. But still, I look at it and I go, I desired that, I bought it. And now I'm caring for it. I'm watering it. I'm soaking the roots in a certain way. I'm trimming it. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. and there's nothing wrong with being in love or being, attracted to somebody or something like that. Nobody's saying that. But the point at which we kind of solidify the object of our desire and turn it into a kind of unfulfillable craving and attachment and fixation, that's when your mind does that, you're not a happy person.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the idea is that it's okay in some way, okay, quote unquote, to desire something or to have desires and want something, but it's the attachment and it's the craving and the attaching to it as the thing that's going to make me happy forever and ever that is the problem.
Yeah, and in doing that, you objectify whatever it is you think is the thing. And you ignore the fact that the objectification is actually in your mind stream. That's where it exists. It's not in the object at all. You don't see the object clearly anymore.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
this kind of delusional piece. So now then, at that point, you go like, when you slide karmically and you go, I can't even generate that much of even a momentary buzz, which is unsatisfactory. I'm just lost here. I'm just completely resentful about my life. I hate my life. I hate other people. When you move into the complete environment of aggression, which is, remember, that was one of the three sort of root kleshas, the desire part gets really remote, and you think the only fulfillment you get is in the actual kind of bathing or basking in your aggression, whether it's external in the form of rage or abuse, or it's internalized in the form of depression and anxiety. And you can see people, this is one of the powerful things for me about teaching Dharma is I will sometimes see people, they look fine to me. I go, what's wrong? There's nothing wrong with you. You're okay, and inside themselves, they're in a horrible state of mind. And there's no access point for recalibrating it, which is what practice is for. When you can get that basic dilemma and you apply meditation practice and you apply it without this kind of magical thinking of weekend enlightenment intensives and flipping switches and stuff. But you say, I gradually cultivated my current situation the way it is. I'm going to gradually cultivate and optimize the situation by, spending more time cultivating positive karma than negative karma. And so that's at a relative level, that's what you're really doing with the wheel, is you're saying, maybe there's a better way than just basking in aggression. How about just sit still for a little while if you can and just watch it come and go? Bring up that part of your mind that can see, that has some clarity.
Well, it's really interesting because I was thinking about this book and this idea of samsara and kind of trying to in that moment, pause and not act, not react. And that's something that I teach with parents is bringing mindfulness to those moments of to let go of our reaction, to kind of move into a observational place in those moments. And that's exactly what this is teaching too, is this, just that pause in the larger sense in every part of our life and how it can kind of help us in all senses in our life.
Well, yeah, exactly. Meditation is the original timeout. You just take some time, you take some stillness, and you just allow what's there already to be there and to be seen. Because usually we're just such busybodies, we can't stop, even in our spiritual practice, we can't stop trying to move it all around and manipulate the whole situation. So this is kind of, you could say, if you really thought about it, this is kind of the most common sense approach is, let me just cease for a moment, like a cease and desist order on trying to manipulate your state of mind towards an optimal circumstance and just getting yourself in deeper and deeper. Just leave some space, leave a pause, see what's there, even relax a little bit.
And as we sort of pause, as we relax, as we kind of cease that constant action, then this is so as I've been thinking about this wheel, it's Gosh, I don't really, I mean, well, I can see myself, I can see all of these realms. Like I've been in all these realms for sure. And I can see them, that they come up throughout my day in different places. But when I think about it objectively, like really, I don't really want to live in any of these realms. And that's kind of where in your book, those practices come in. But you're saying that this is like the practices of pausing and stopping and trying to stop manipulating to a higher outcome are what can help us kind of slow down this wheel, step out of this wheel. Is that what happens?
Well, I mean, there's two vectors that are being described here. One is, yeah, go for a better outcome. Why not? If you're on the wheel, like if, and you're living in the ghetto of the wheel, which is the hell realm, why not move into a better neighborhood? Where you don't hate yourself all the time. How about that idea? You practice loving kindness and you go, okay, after a year of doing this practice, I feel a little bit more tolerant to myself and a little more peaceful. And maybe I'm willing to, to give myself and other people a break because I've kind of rehabituated my whole psychology in that way with this practice. But ultimately, the point is that because of the impermanence, the deep understanding of impermanence, there's another piece to it, which is you not only realize the realms are impermanent, but that they're, and this is going to be hard for people to swallow, they're fundamentally insubstantial.
Yeah, they're a fiction.
They're a form of fiction that can get very, very solid, and whole worlds can come and go within that fiction. Whole, World War IIs and stuff. So nobody's saying it's insubstantial in the sense that, if you're in World War II, you got to find the best outcome for yourself and the rest of the people involved. But, where is it? It's gone, But it left a lot of impact, World War II, on this world that we're living in right now. And so that's understanding karma, that karma does create cause and effect and conditional reality. So the insubstantiality only amounts to a kind of,
You have perspective we can take.
Total perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But once you're within the operation of kind of relative situations, you go, okay, our job is really to optimize this. We really want to have the best outcome, the most compassionate outcome, the smartest outcome. But ultimately, from the point of view of an individual practitioner, seeing the illusory quality of it is very important at a certain point.
Yeah, you would probably really appreciate, David, the book Sapiens. I don't know if you've read this.
Oh, you're the second person telling me about that.
Oh, Sapiens is amazing. But he talks about how, it talks about sort of the fictions that we live our worlds by, like the fiction in some way that there is a United States of America, whereas it's not a physical thing that you can find where there's, you know what I mean? Like we kind of make these borders, but if it is a collective fiction that makes a huge reality right in the world. But this is kind of the same idea. It's like looking at these things and seeing that these are ways, this sort of our narrative mind that we frame our existence. And if we can have a deep understanding of that, this is not, we can kind of we can step out of it, at least for a little bit in some ways.
Well, and if you understand the constructed quality of it, it sounds like that book is sort of like the next book I was thinking of writing, which was sort of, how much of reality is constructed by agreements and assumptions, but it sounds like if somebody already wrote the book,
no, it's a whole other book. You should read it because you'll get a lot out of it. It has a different slant, but that's part of it.
But the basic point there of saying, this is a tricky point because Buddhism is not nihilistic. It's not saying, look, it's all empty, it's all impermanent, so why bother? It's not saying that. It's saying it's not fixed in the way that you habitually think of it, so you can change it. And you can change some of the underlying premises. You can change societies. You can change people. There is the possibility of movement or shift towards what most of us would consider a more positive outcome, a more enlightened outcome. So, that means that, you can have that glimpse of it and then bring it back into the thing and say, you have a lot of energy at that point to work with apparent circumstances as they are and try to be genuinely helpful,
So as we start to get this perspective, and we get this perspective on our own thoughts and kind of on reality in general, we can stop maybe spinning our wheels quite so much and use our energy in a more productive way.
Yeah, I think that's as far as I get it, that's the idea.
This is so cool. Oh my gosh, David, I could probably talk to you for like another 2 hours about this.
Well, I've been doing a lot of podcasts lately, and a couple of them are coming back for round 2.
Yeah. Well, I might do that.
There's a lot
too.
there. I mean, this Wheel of Life thing is like, it's 2,500 years old, and we're talking about it today for a reason, which is it didn't just go away.
And to me, it's so cool that it's like it's an artwork, right? It's like a visual representation, and it gives us so much. I mean, I love the symbology that art brings us, and you've broken this down so beautifully. Wow, everyone, you have to get the book. Get the book. It's really cool. You'll get a lot out of it, even if you're not you don't think of yourself as Buddhist. If you just kind of interested, it really is interesting, interesting reading and thought-provoking for sure. David, how can people find out more about you? And I know you do teachings, and you go to do teachings at various places. And how can people find out more about you and your schedule and your work? Yeah,
well, the easiest way is, and a great place to start is my website, which is just David Nichtern, DavidNichtern.com. So the website has a lot of links, and it also has some, other talks and things on it and access points. And the other way is Facebook. I use Facebook. So I have 2 pages. You should go to what they call the fan page. Not that I want you to be my fan, particularly unless it's a hot day, then I do. But Facebook.com/David Nichtern. Go to that one and hit like, and then kind of you get into the flow of that particular stuff. But between those two, and then I'm teaching. My schedule is posted on my website and what's coming up. There's a bunch of teacher training programs. Like tomorrow, I'm going up to Kaya Yoga in Westport, and we're doing a meditation teacher training program, level 1, which is an introductory level. People just can come for tomorrow night for 3 hours. I don't know if this will be on the air by then, but maybe not. So.
Oh no, yeah, probably not. Probably.
Okay, but yeah, you'll look and see. When do you think it will be on the air? Around when?
Well, the schedule's a bit uncertain right now. Sometime maybe in December or January.
Oh, okay, all right. So then just look at the website and Facebook page, and you'll be able to catch up. Yeah, in the meantime, if you do get a chance to read the book, and you can, and you want to, just log in with a question or perception, you can do that at davidnichtern@gmail.com. I don't mind giving out my email address to people because I get, short, meaningful questions are easy to deal with. I mean, don't write me your life story if you don't mind.
Awesome.
Just for time's sake. So anyhow, it's a very deep topic. I believe it has the whole Buddhist teachings embedded right there in it. Obviously, there are many others, but this is a powerful one, and it's been something I've contemplated my whole life.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, David. It's been really, this is like so up my alley. I love talking about this.
Yeah. Well, you're a good student of this, because you're really just kind of mapping it to your own experience, which is where the juice comes from. So thank you for having me on to your show and talk, and lots of best wishes to everybody out there. Whether you get enlightened or not, I still love you. Okay.
That's awesome. Thanks, David.
Okay. Bye.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I hope you got a lot of this out of this episode. I know that I tend to geek out a bit with this stuff. And if you have any questions about it, you're always welcome to email me at hunter@hunteryoga.com, and definitely check out David's book. It's really, really accessible and a really, really cool book. So check that out. And And, I want to thank our sponsor for this episode, Choose to Be Nice. Go over to choosetobenice.com and you can get 20% off all their cool stuff. My super snuggly sweatshirt, you can get one too. Use the coupon code HUNTER20. So that's Hunter and the number 2 and the number 0 for 20% off apparel, and just take their pledge and support their work bringing positivity and anti-bullying messages into schools. Thank you to William Fields for the music. And if you want to practice meditation, you want to practice loving kindness, I have a new page on my website now on hunteryoga.com. You can go to hunteryoga.com/free resources, and you can have me guiding you through loving kindness practice and a 5-minute meditation, 3-minute meditation. Just make a short practice to bring these into your life and to sort of get out of that karmic cycle, right? That we talked about with David. So you can check that out. And if you like this episode, please tell friends, tell a friend, tell your mom, tell your dad, share it, all that good stuff. And I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful that you're here. And I invite you to use these resources, right? To go, to Choose to Be Nice, go use my free resources, connect with me, because I want you to live more consciously and more fully. I want your light to be as bright as it possibly can be. You have a responsibility, I think, to take care of yourself so that you can help shift things in the world. And I want you to do that. And I know you can. So keep going, my friend. Thank you so much for listening. And I will see you real soon. Namaste.